Fantastic.
Yep.
Today's Wednesday.
Today is Wednesday.
And we're in 2020.
2020.
Pretty exciting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Super exciting. And this is the first principle today that we're diving into in our retention series, which I think is exciting.
What's this show all about, by the way?
I don't really know.
Oh, you don't?
I
you
just
walked
show
in
up.
and,
Yeah, I saw the camera pointing at me. And
our whole series and what we're doing and this stuff.
So
why don't you tell the good folks out there a little bit about what we're
doing? Happy to do that. So we are this show here is SaaS Coach. So we focus on all things related to software
and how
software
to grow
as a service, how to grow it, etc. And this series that we're diving into, kind of principle 1 here today, is all about retention. So we did a whole series last year that was focused on conversion, how to get people to convert, take that action, sign up, etc. at your website. And so now once you get them on board, what next? How do you keep them? So that all important retention, reducing the churn rate, and keeping those users engaged, coming back, continuing to pay for subscriptions. And
because that's one of the biggest things. If we're going to put all that effort into our marketing and we're really going to drive conversion like we talked about in our last series, what the most important thing is we've gotten these people, we've spent money doing that, and there was an acquisition cost to it. And so what we really want to make sure is that we're killing it when it comes to keeping those people on and really maintaining the highest level of the users that we've already captured and spent money on acquiring. And so we're going through the 10 principles. Today's principle number 1.
They're not just 10 principles, they're big honking principles.
They are big honking principles. And we've got a download coming very soon where you can get all the principles. These shows are really the dive in deep and talk about them. So you're getting a ton of value out of the shows, but we'll have the guidebook that's available that'll have all the principles. We're just kind of teasing it a little bit and want to make sure that we're kind of sharing a little bit about the show, and then we'll put the guidebook out there so people can get all of the principles together. But today we're really talking about the first one, which is make the onboarding experience freaking awesome. And so really one of the first principles for us when it comes to retaining customers is the onboarding process. And so to me that means the first couple weeks that someone is using the software, even the first interaction that they have with the software platform. And every company has a different level of onboarding. You know, you might be something that's a business software that onboarding means a lot of training and support and all of these other factors. The other side of onboarding could be as simple as if you're a gaming software, it's the first experience that they have coming into the software and figuring it out. And so onboarding, that term really covers a wide range of different things. But the key factor here is that first experience, whether it be, you know, the first time that they log in, as well as the first week to couple weeks that they're in the software, it does have to be freaking awesome, because that is making a decision in their head that is going to last into the future. That even if it's an annual software, you know, it's something that first impression.
First impression.
And I know you were thinking through that first impression piece a lot yourself.
So absolutely, right? That first experience is gonna it probably make or break whether they come back, whether they're hooked, whether they're excited about it, and whatnot. So if you had to break it out, what are the topics would you say that go into onboarding? You mentioned support and obviously the whole experience, but what others you think are important? And we can
some of the top ones are really usability. You know, how easy is it for the software to use and be intuitive for people to find what they're looking for in that first day, first week. If they are, you know, like GPS, if you can't find what you're looking for and you're confused, you know, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And we can talk about that more. Communication, how well are you communicating with them? And there's a lot of interesting tactics around communication in the first day, first week, first month that people are using the software. Support, obviously the fact that people are, you know, can they reach out to someone to get the help that they need? Then there's, you know, having information like a tour or tech support or some of these other things that can really walk them
that
through
include
everything.
like maybe a knowledge base and
yeah, and then the
tutorials?
next piece is really a knowledge base.
Gotcha.
And having information that people can find about the software, your documentation, live chat is one of the big things now, which kind of covers both the support as well as having a tour. You know, one of the cool things that you can do now with software is there's other software you can install that when someone logs in, you can kind of overlay a tour and you say it shows them what this button is, you click next, it shows them what the next button is. So if you want to, you can even create within your own platform kind of a tour that they can go through. And then the last piece to onboarding for me is how do we create value really quickly? Like, how can we deliver something that someone says, wow, this was so worth me signing up or making the purchase? And to me, that's a little bit about prioritization of features, you know, what you're putting in front of people first, you know, things like that that really help us understand our target audience and make sure that in the first hour, the first day, they feel like they got something out of this. Because I've seen a lot of softwares where you log in and you kind of look around and there's some neat features, but it takes a while to really see value out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and what you want to do is make sure that your camera works. Your points to onboarding. And the last one was really creating value quickly.
Yeah.
And the piece is that I've seen softwares, and one of the challenges is you sign up and then, you know, based off of the feature set and what the software does, you don't really realize value until you're utilizing it for a while or a couple weeks in.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you can do is really look at the feature set and the tactics to understand, is there a way that you can take even little pieces and move some of the value up so that as soon as they're in it, they're feeling like, okay, I'm getting something out of this, rather than it being a longer period of time. So those are some of the main factors that we look at.
How would you, you know, software that takes me through almost like a wizard when I'm going in the first time, where would you put that?
tour piece.
I think, that tour could kind of tie some of those elements together and kind of moving that value up front, even if it's something down.
Yeah, I think it can help train, and that depends on your audience. You know, there are certain people, and this is where analytics can come in. I tend to see those tours and shut them off because I want to just go explore myself.
Yeah.
But there's probably other personality types that like to go through that and see button by button, you know, how something works. But it at least creates that safety net that as soon as someone logs in, they have the option of slowly walking through the interface to understand where things are at. And so again, for me, it's really that kind of ties onto the usability piece. You know, we want to develop and design the software in a way that's very intuitive. That's why you look at a lot of softwares and there's not a ton of variation from best practices. You know, navigation is either at the top or it's on the left-hand side. You know, your user account is up in the top right-hand corner. You're talking about lists, and they typically have a button. You know, all of these things are best practices, but you really want to make sure that the usability is very good. And I see it as like, you know, entering into a new software is like going to a new city. I don't know where to go. And the last thing that you want to do is have different signposts, you know, like stop signs are blue instead of red. And
those universals.
Exactly.
Universal. Yeah.
And then that, you know, our Google Maps, our GPS is really that tour that we talked about. It's something to help show the way. And I may use it. It just depends whether I'm the type to go to the city and walk around. But I hope that you've built the city in a way that I understand how it works, you know. But then the other piece is if I need additional help, that I've got that map that can really help show me around as well.
Yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it, right? You see the big buildings, you know, that's downtown.
Right.
Those type of little cues that.
And they're everywhere. And if you think about it, and imagine again, I know that when we're dealing with software, it's different than designing a city, that there's already best practices and there's these things. But as software developers, we sometimes, you know, might want to be creative or feel like we're doing something different. And the truth is, what we want to do is look at what's already being done in the marketplace and follow that.
Creative could be confusing.
Well, yeah, imagine going to a city where all the signs are different colors, or the sidewalks are all flat with the road. You know what I mean? I'd be very confused of like, okay, all the differences is a line instead of it being up 3 inches. Sounds dangerous. But you go into this city, and if all these little things, like you said, buildings, the way doors are, the signs, if it's different, I'm going to have a horrible time walking around, and I'm going to walk away from that city saying, I never want to go back there because it was so hard to find what I did. It was a little bit dangerous, all these things. And so when we're building our software, we really want to think about those best practices, look at other successful platforms, mirror some of the things that they're doing. And again, just make sure that any decision that we make and how we lay out and design the platform matches with something that's intuitive to what someone can figure out and understand without being explained.
We were kind of talking about this yesterday. We were talking with a client that's kind of an early stage of product development, and you pulled up a number of different sites, right, and platforms. And what was really crazy is we know that there's the universals, but I was watching very closely, and there were so many elements that were almost identical of many of the different platforms that you pulled up. So really, I think, and that's why I mentioned the creativity, we might want to get creative, but we don't want to confuse users.
100%.
People like familiarity. That's what we feel comfortable with. That's allows us to be, navigate easily and whatnot. So,
well, and one of the hardest things that we can do, and we see this in design and usability all the time in our business, whether it's with a website, it's with an intranet, it's with a software platform, is really that it's hard to step back and think of something from the standpoint of someone brand new with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And that's something that I personally have tried to train myself to do is, especially when we're building a website or something like that, you're going through this process where you're going through wireframing and design and then development. And so you understand everything so that when you look at it, it's naturally intuitive because you've already been through it. But what you really need to do to be, I think, successful is put yourself in the mind frame of, I don't know any of that stuff. All of this is brand new to me. And I really have to look at this from a perspective of someone that has no knowledge. Zero.
That ideal prospect that you're probably targeting, right? You're marketing, you're running towards them. Once you get them in the door, what do you show that person, not someone that has my experience or yours, but that person.
And it's hard to remove that bias, but it's something you can at least either train yourself to do, or at least in the process have a moment where you all step back and say, all right, guys, let's look at this from a perspective of someone that doesn't have all our background on it and just try and poke holes in it. Because I'd rather have some of that negativity and poke holes than provide something that's not going to work or be intuitive.
So my thought goes to like beta testers, right? So I think something that you can do very tangible is beta test the actual onboarding experience, right? And all those points that you listed that are part of, that make up onboarding, make sure you're getting a ton of feedback and understanding what those initial users, in addition to you and your team, but what the feedback that you're getting.
And we'll talk about analytics in a future principle, but the other piece is really looking at the data. There's some great tools out there that can show you, based off of sign up, how many people are coming back week after week. And so I've seen with softwares where, in the first week, because it's new, 90% of the users come back at least once after they sign up. But second week it drops down to 25%. You've got a huge issue there if your rates of return of new users are dropping over the weeks to something really low. And so data can show you very fast, is there something wrong with my initial period that I'm working with people? The other piece to that is communication. So one thing that softwares forget about is, how do we communicate with our new users? It's great that they signed up and maybe they get a confirmation, thank you for signing up, but then if that's the last time you talk to them, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so what I really like is when a software will put me in a sequence and start sending me little instructions or tips. And so, the second day that I'm in it, I get an email that says, have you explored X? And it does a couple things. One, it helps teach me a little bit. Mm-hmm. Two, it drives up that analytics that I'm more likely to click and go back to the software to look at that. And so a series of emails that kind of introduce me or uncover really unique pieces or help reinforce the value of what I purchased.
Yeah.
We really need to set up that sequence of emails, especially again in the first day, week, or a couple weeks.
Yeah, and that was one, I think you can frame that value through that communication as well. So there's a lot that can be accomplished with those touches. Now, along those lines of communication, is it just an email? Is it a push notification? What is it?
I think it's a mix of both. Email is obviously the default, but if you have a higher price software and it's B2B, you may want to have a physical phone call or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
If you can get their text message and do something like that. If it's an app, a push notification. I think there's a lot of ways to do it, but you really have to look at how do you not be intrusive but also provide the most value. And there may be some use to testing that out a little bit with your users. And again, this goes back to everything, and I'm trying to think from a perspective of our own viewers not having watched prior stuff of ours, but if you haven't sat down and created a persona of your audience and the people that are your users and really determine some factors of like how often do they like to be contacted, things like that can be in there, what are their personality traits, that can be a good starting point to say, okay, we really need to stick with email versus we can try some more advanced techniques. There's definitely some things to do.
Yeah, and I think the point on the communication is you need to figure out who your users are, how they like to be communicated to.
Right.
And there's probably going to be multiple different channels, but you don't want to overdo it because
the
last thing you want to do is bombard them and turn them off with your communication during that onboarding period.
Mm-hmm. And then really, one of the other points we talked about was support, and that kind of mixes with having technical documentation, someone that they can email or call. Again, in those first couple weeks, making sure that it's easy for them to find information or reach out to somebody can be really important. Live chat within a software has become a big trend, mainly because we want to make it as easy as possible, especially in that early time frame.
Going back to universals, right? I think that's something that people are coming to expect,
right?
Even if it's like a chatbot or something, but people want it. They're looking in the bottom right-hand corner of that screen to enter something in, and so even if you don't have someone live there, you might want to consider having that because so many softwares and apps and sites have that.
Yeah, the chatbot can be great because, if you have a library of documentation and someone puts in, hey, I'm having an issue with X, it can automatically go into that library and pull out an article for them.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely some tools that can be used. But I think the key comes back to, we're talking about user retention. And really this principle comes back to that first impression. Whether it's the first time that they log in, the first week that they use the software, if it's a larger term, like more integrated software to a business, maybe it's the first month or 2 months, but we really have to make sure that initial period that they are going to be using it meets a lot of criteria because it really does set the precedent for the rest of the relationship. And if the next time that they renew, whether it's in a month or in a year or however it works, we want to keep them, that onboarding process, that initial first impression is just so important. And that's what we're about.
Yep. No, so onboarding is a big deal. And again, once we have our guidebook ready to go, the principles will be listed out there, so that'll be more resource and reference. And if you're watching this, if it's a replay, it might already be there, so look for the link.
Right.
What are we talking about next week?
So next week we are talking about, let's take a look here, building a sticky product. So this is another good one of really understanding how do you create a product that is sticky and keeps people there. Obviously that ties in huge to retention, but there's some very specific thought processes and approaches that you can take to making the software more sticky.
Yeah, and this is just kind of a obviously really important topic, but a progression from the onboarding.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about some of the things in onboarding, and that's so important how we keep people coming back. But we're going to dive in more when we talk next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about stickiness. We're going to be talking about analytics. We'll get a little bit more in depth on support. There's, again, 10 principles that we're going to be going through, and I think that just like onboarding, there's some nuggets that you can pull out and make some simple changes to your software to improve retention. And as we go through these 10, there's going to be a lot of those little nuggets that can just make a huge improvement to the software retention.
Yeah. So follow along.
Yeah.
Take some action, implement some of these things. Again,
reach out to us.
Small action steps. Yeah, reach out to us. Leave us comments or
give us a call.
Any other way you want to reach out. We're happy to feel that feedback. And we'll be back next week to talk about keeping that product sticky. Yeah, people coming back.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.